Welcome to the Success is Subjective podcast series brought to you by collegealternative.org, presented by Lilly Consulting. I'm your host, Joanna Lilly. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Paul Taylor. Paul brings to Livestrong House 28 years of experience and knowledge in the residential treatment industry. His roles have included special education teacher, group facilitator, and director of academics, residential, and marketing. He has served as an executive director for the last 10 years. Paul earned his BS in psychology and sociology and a master's of science in special education from the University of Utah, where he also earned distinction as a comprehensive behavior specialist. He has specialty training in behavior management, behavior consulting, assessments and testing, and vocational training. Paul holds a special education teaching certificate from Utah State University. He has 6 children and a wife he loves doing everything with. He enjoys the outdoors, running and biking, but his favorite thing of all is playing with his kids and dancing with his wife, Sarah. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Paul. Paul, I'm super excited to have you on the podcast, not just because I like you and you're interesting and I'm excited to hear your story, but also you are allowing me to brush off the dust of being an interviewer because I have not interviewed anybody for the last 4 months, and I'm kicking it off with you. So thanks for being on.
I'm honored, and I'm glad that you find me interesting, that my kids think the same thing about me. Dad, you're kind of interesting. So I think I'm funny, but they don't. So anyway, I'm thrilled to connect with you like this. This is awesome. Thank you.
Jury's out whether or not you're funny. We'll see if that comes through. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's just jump in. Why don't you actually tell the listeners, where did you grow up, right? So, because I don't really know the full story of where was Paul Taylor raised, but also what was the messaging that you were hearing from your family as well as kind of the larger community in which you were raised about post-secondary, what you're supposed to do or post-secondary education?
Yeah. So I grew up in Utah, right in the South Salt Lake area. And, it's a funny question because I never really thought about it. It was just something that you do. Everyone in my neighborhood, everyone in my school, you go to college, and everyone ahead of me, everyone after me, you just go. And I grew up in we struggled. I had 7 siblings. And so I knew I was going to be paying for college. So I started working just because I knew I had to do that. And I remember the first day of college after we had our summer break, it was like this just glorified first day of school. Everyone from the local high schools were all there. In fact, I don't know of hardly anyone that was my age, one of my friends, that didn't go to college. It was just expected. Everyone had their own course of how they got there and how they were going to pay for it, but it was just kind of expected. My parents never once said, "You're going to school." My dad went, my mom didn't. It was just what you did. And I was one of the oldest siblings, so I didn't have, everyone else ahead of me went. It was just something you had to do. And I'm grateful for that. And yet here I am working now with young adolescents and young adults that it's not even expected sometimes. It's not even an option, or it's not even a thought, whatever, there's a lot that's going through their heads, but it's clearly different today than it was back then.
Yeah, no, totally. And I do want to dig into really be able to spotlight the work that you're doing, not just what you're doing, but where and what's the name of it, right? And how can people get connected to you? So we're gonna talk about that in a second, but I do want to ask just about that transition to college for you, right? It was expected. Like you just said, we didn't even have a conversation. What was college like for you? How was that transition? What was the, collegiate experience like?
Yeah. And one thing I want to share too is I was one of those young men that had the walk of shame down the hallway in elementary and junior high where I went to special ed classes. And at first I thought it was the coolest thing ever because I got tokens and I could buy plants for my mom, and it was this coolest thing. And then I finally figured out, oh, you're one of those kids that is not as smart as everyone else in your class. And it was hard. And so growing up, back to that first question, it's there was a bit of fear that I would struggle in college, and it was a bit scary. But again, I didn't have any time to even be worried about that. You just went. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I found that learning in high school was one thing, and I remember there being struggles, but in college, I felt like well, one, I was paying for it. So I definitely respected the time and everything was required because I was not going to waste that money. But I love learning. In fact, I don't think I did in elementary or, even in high school, but definitely in college. And I had fun too. It wasn't like it was just this labor intensive studying every night, which I had to work harder than most people. Like people were like playing and having a good time. I had to study, but I still loved it. It was every single year was very enjoyable, and even good connections with professors that to this day I still have one that I'm still connected with. So I absolutely loved it.
So I that's great to hear. Honestly, I feel like the majority of conversations that take place on this podcast really speak to, maybe there were some ups in the experience if they went to college at all, but there's like more of a resounding message of like, whew, man, there were moments where it was not glorious. So it's pretty rare that I actually get the opportunity to hear somebody who's just like really glowing about their post-secondary experience. I'm just curious, this is kind of off script. What was your degree in?
So I actually got a degree in psychology and sociology. So in 4.5 years, I got two degrees. I just, again, it come back to I wasn't going to waste my money, and I wasn't going to make waste my time, and I wasn't going to take bowling or other classes just to get those extra little credits. And that's what was and a certificate in criminology. So I got down to business and really enjoyed it. I felt productive, and I really love learning. And the thing that really helped too, just as a side note, is that I also jumped into that field of psychology and sociology like right out of the gate. And so everything I was learning, I could apply every day. So it was just fascinating. And I remember even teachers asking me like about my experience in these places that I was working. And so I think that helped is just being able to apply everything I was learning.
Well, I'm glad you actually just like talked about that because that was going to be my next question, right? Like once you graduated, what was the experience like for you after you got your degree? And you're saying like, yeah, I'm applying all the stuff that I've just learned or I'm in the process of learning. So what the heck did you do? Because I love all three of those like, I mean, technically, aren't those all liberal arts kind of paths? So and I here's another like little plug. We've shifted, right, as a society, and we're so focused on STEM, math, science, like any of those engineering type of programs. But not everybody is inclined to like or learn like that. And so I'm also a fan of the liberal arts. And so I'm just kind of obviously there's my little tangent, but back to the question. What did you actually do when you got your degree? What did you do?
Yeah, and interesting that you say that too, because I knew that with those two degrees, I wasn't, it's not like I can just go be a therapist because I got a degree in psychology. And that made me a little bit nervous because higher education or grad school definitely was a daunting and scary thing. But again, because I was already in it, and I think it made learning a lot easier for me. Here's an interesting twist. I went down and I immediately went and said, "Hey, I want a job as a counselor in the juvenile correction system." And I went down there like, "Oh, we don't really have a job like that." And I even did some volunteer work and internships. Whatever, I would do it for free just to get that experience. Um, but when I went down there, they're like, "Hey, we don't have a job, but would you like being a teacher? And we'll pay you to be a teacher while you teach down here." And I'm like, "Okay." And then so they paid me as a school teacher, but I went and got my teaching certificate. That was the first thing I did. But in my heart, like I wanted to do something in human behavior and the mental health industry or whatever. I don't even want to call it industry, but field. So, but I got my teaching certificate and I fell in love with it. I love to teach. But with that, and then my degree in psychology, I decided, I got to go to grad school. I know it will help me. And so I applied to go to grad school. And here's an interesting thing, and I don't mind sharing this because this is a part of my journey. Is I had to apply, or I took the GRE 5 times, and I mean, I got the lowest ACT score you can get to even get into college, but I got in, right? And once I got in, it was fine, and I got good grades. But the grad school thing, that scared me because like I'm never going to get in. And I remember I was married at the time, and I remember not even telling my wife that I had applied again because I was so, I guess, embarrassed. Like I failed the test again, and I don't know how to get in. And I remember sitting in the back of my house, like literally under this bush, taking the letter out to see if after this was the sixth time, and I got in, and it was absolutely awesome. And that, talk about fun. Grad school was like my favorite of all of it because then you're focusing in on the very thing that you want to do. But to really answer your question, yeah, I worked in juvenile corrections for a while, and then I jumped right into this field of working with adolescents and ran an all-girl school in Arizona for 13 years, and then a couple other programs, and then where I'm at today. So I've been in this field for 28 years and love it.
Well, and you also kind of slid in there the piece about being young and married, right? As you're like, early in your career and doing grad school, you have kids, right? This is like more of a statement, not just a question. I don't know. Actually, that was meant to be a question, but it really came across as a statement. I think that's we'll actually circle back to that towards the end of this conversation, because I think that there's some advice that you can be honestly sharing with some parents that listen to this podcast from a parent perspective of raising young adults in this day and age, and like how you can support different paths. So you've done a lot, and you look way younger than having worked in some sort of field for 28 years.
Well, you're really kind. I appreciate that. But yeah, we've got a couple kids. We've got six, and we have some that are already off and in college, and the other three that are still figuring it out. But yeah, it's been fun. But I love, just back to your kind of your questions about secondary education, is I loved it, and overcame some hurdles. Just as I said, just getting into grad school was not easy, but it was worth it. And I'm applying everything I learned every single day.
I think it's such a, thank you for sharing that first and foremost. I feel like that's, a vulnerability that, to your point, like if you're embarrassed and you don't want to share that information with your wife in the moment, like it's hard to also be comfortable and share that on the air, right? To a bunch of people, like you don't know who's going to be listening to this and for whatever reason judging you for that. But the reality is more people need to hear that type of adversity that we've overcome.
Well, and I'm jumping ahead, and something that you said, and I think it happens even here, and a lot of the programs that are out there, is that so many people today feel like that because of learning difficulties, whatever it might be, that they'll never make it in college. And so, as hard as it is, just be honest that, like, hey, yeah, I failed the test 5 times. You can get there. You just have to try. And so, giving them hope and showing them the path of how to do that, it's just awesome. So I don't mind sharing, and I think it's important for them to know, because I think there's more people that struggled than right? And funny that even after I've shared that with a couple of friends, like, yeah, I had to take it like 3 times too. So yeah, but you can do it.
Yep. Okay, so we kind of paused to, why don't you actually tell us what are you doing, right? Like, but I also want to hear, what's your role, what's the organization, who do you support, and then obviously we want to know how to connect with you.
Yeah, so after running a few programs across the country, I decided with 2 other partners to start our own school. And it's a really unique model that we've applied a lot of the good things that I've learned from being in the trenches and being a frontline staff, all that good stuff. And it's a program for young adolescent boys. We have an adolescent program and a young adult program. And it's just really transitional, getting them plugged in and giving them exposure and helping them overcome some of those like mental and emotional blocks that they have, so that they can still be successful. And it's working. It's really cool.
Well, I see that you're wearing a winter hat that has the logo or the emblem, so lean in so we can actually see it.
You like that? So
Yeah, fancy.
I'm wearing that because the AC is on high and I'm freezing. But yeah, it's Live Strong House is our school, and we've got some pretty cool swag. But we're pretty proud. We've been open now 5 years, and got a great track record. And so it's been fun.
Well, and we'll make sure that we have the website link in the show notes and the way in which people can connect with you. So if they want to reach out, whether you give them email address or phone number or whatever is most appropriate, again, that will be in the show notes. So let me ask you this then. If you could give any one piece of advice to a young person, right? Maybe it's like somebody who's kind of similar in terms of the struggle, right? In like having to work for their academic success like you had when you were in your childhood, or just like generally speaking, what piece of advice would you give to a young person right now?
Yeah, and I don't really need to think much long about that. It really is, don't let fear guide your life or the decisions you make. You really, I mean, lean into them. Just don't let fear get in the way of the things that you want to do, for sure. And you're definitely more capable than you think you are. And so, really, quit thinking so much. You can do it, and you may have to be honest and tell people that, yeah, I don't understand. I don't memorize things as well as it looks like everyone else does, but like embrace that and own it and learn a few strategies that you can apply, and you'll be fine. So that was a lot, but really just quit thinking so much and don't let fear guide the steps you're taking. Just, you can do it. You are capable, and I say that from my own experience, but also even what happens here at Livestrong, and even my own kids. I have, and so one thing to parents, you mentioned this earlier, is seek to understand what's really going on in your kids' minds, because you might be thinking, hey, they look really capable and they need to go to college. I went to college, but you got to slow down a little bit and maybe find out why maybe they're a little anxious, because I know a lot of young adults are anxious about school, and have some empathy with what that anxiety looks like. You may not relate and you might not have the same anxieties, but you need to understand them. So ask them. A really quick side story. My son, I played football, and I love watching him play football. He's amazing. And he doesn't want to play his senior year. And I'm really disappointed, because I love watching him, right? And I have all my bleacher buddies. But as I was talking with him about why he didn't want to play when he told me that, I had to first let him know that that's fine. I totally am okay with that. But he told me, he said, Dad, my anxiety is through the roof. I'm so anxious about disappointing my teammates and my coach. I just am sick all the time. And that was so helpful for me to understand. And I think we sometimes have to, again, slow down and understand why our kids might be a little anxious. Anyway, I hope that made sense.
I so appreciate you for being willing to, you didn't even know though, take the brunt of the me brushing the dust off the interview skills in this moment, because I forgot to ask a question. I ask a very pointed question, which is, do you see yourself as successful?
Oh, yeah, I actually do, and I know that sounds like maybe vain. It's not about the success we've had with this new program, which I am so proud of. Humbly and confidently, if you can have both in the same breath, I feel successful that I overcame some of the hurdles that I have had in academics, but also in life. I mean, I had about 7 years ago of depression that about knocked me off my tracks, but I bounced back. And those are the things. Obviously, I look at my family and my kids and my wife. I mean, huge success, right? But it's overcoming some of those. Man, they were some big hurdles. That's why I claim confidently that, yeah, I feel successful.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so before we wrap up, if you could give, I know you just gave some really great advice for parents. Is there anything else that you would add in there? Maybe like an additional tip for parents who are navigating a soon to be young adult or a young adult who is kind of in the midst of launching? What advice would you give?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is just be patient. It's obviously a different course right now, that and life that these young adults are going through. And I felt my own frustration that one of my kids does not want to go to school, or they're acting like they want to go, but they really don't. I can tell. So be patient, and then seek to understand maybe what are some of their barriers. They're not always the barriers that we think they are. And so in a very humble but in a loving way, find out what they are. It really may just be the fear of failure, or you just don't know. And as I work with these young men right now, some of the anxiety they have about school are not the things that you would expect. It could be about just navigating through classes and finding your way around the campus. It's not always what you think it is. And so ask them what their needs are, and then just be patient if they're not going to go, because there's a lot of ways to still be happy and successful.
It's so true. Okay, so I know we talked about it earlier, like, hey, we're going to put the links and the contact information in the show notes. How can people connect with you?
For those that know me, it's the same number I've always had, or they can email me at ptaylor@livestronghouse.com. And I'm kind of the face and the head, or the front man of the school. So all lines come straight to me.
Love it. Paul, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. I want to thank my guests for joining me on this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. Also, put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email me at Joanna, Joanna, @successissubjective.org. I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please do me a favor and subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on any other podcast playing app, such as Audible, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener supported, made possible by me and by you. You can support this podcast by joining the Patreon community at patreon.com/successissubjective. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.